Siwa oasis a short distance east of Egypt's Libyan border is quite expansive, consisting of 2 large lakes. It's so big, the ancient Egyptian name for it was Field of Trees. And in fact, from some points you could stand in the oasis, look to the horizon, and run out of horizon before you run out of oasis. It isn't known to have been a particularly important site to ancient Egypt, or even to have had any connection to the pharaonic state, until the 26th dynasty, Egypt's last native dynasty, when an oracular temple was established where prophets of Amun operated. Even then it's not clear that any pharaohs ever visited, being generally too busy either resisting being conquered or conquering. And we can hardly blame them. Visiting Siwa was not a casual affair. As the crow flies, it's about 250 miles, but when journeying into the desert west of the Nile, you don't go in a straight line. That part of the world is replete with oases, so the sensible traveller plans a route between them. It'll be longer, but you won't have to carry hundreds of times your weight in water, which is a bit of a false economy. These days there are roads, one going across the gorgeous northern Egyptian coast, but not so in ancient times. So why were the oracles of Siwa important? Well, Siwa was in an interesting position, culturally. It was far from the Nile, but held a cult to Egypt's supreme deity. To get legitimacy, which was important even to conquerors, you might feel it was something of a pilgrimage you had to complete. Or you might try to bribe the prophets like the Spartan general Lysander. He didn't manage it, by the way, the Siwan prophets ratted him out to the Spartans. Or, like Cambyses II of Persia, you might think it best to crush the Siwans in battle and enslave them. Unfortunately, like Stannis Baratheon, Cambyses underestimated the hostility of the terrain. Now, it's actually debatable whether any of this happened, but Herodotus gives an account of Cambyses sending an army of 50,000 men out of Thebes to conquer Siwa, and the army not even making it halfway. Because even going from oasis to oasis, it's a lot for an army to make a trek like that. 50,000 men and their horses and other service animals, and the food and water required to keep them going, it might be Cambyses never even ordered the expedition. After all, Persian accounts of the time don't mention it. Among the people who thought Cambyses did fail to conquer Siwa appears to be Alexander the Great. He himself either went in person or much more likely sent a delegation to pay respects. Ostensibly, Alexander came to liberate Egypt from Persian rule, though what that looked like in practice was Alexander adding Egypt to his own empire. Even so, Alexander claims that the oracles of Amun invested him with pharaohhood. Jolly decent of them when you consider the circumstances, and the fact that that wasn't their job to begin with. Alexander claimed that one of Egypt's last native pharaohs, Nectanebo II, had come to Macedonia disguised as an Egyptian magician and, inhabited by the spirit of Amun, impregnated Alexander's mother. Handily, that would make Alexander both a blood heir to the 2 kingdoms and the demigodly offspring of Egypt's chief deity. Fancy that. So Alex either went off or sent off to the oracles of Siwa to do the equivalent of a mystical 23andMe, and what do you know? They verified the whole story. Siwa has a history of being a bit different than the rest of Egyptian culture, maybe even defiant of it. Although it's commonly thought that the ancient Egyptian religion, in terms of specific cults to the ancient Egyptian gods, died out with the coming of Christianity after Egypt became part of the Roman Empire, evidence of how Christian Siwa was at the time isn't very clear, and when an Islamic army came to the oasis in the early 8th century, the Siwans drove them back, and in fact they would continue to go their own way religiously, with faith practices borrowing from ancient Egyptian, Greek, Christian and probably Islamic custom well into the 12th century. Even now, Siwan religious practices, though certainly Islamic, differ from mainstream Egyptian ones. More recently even than that, Siwa gained a bit of side-eye from Europeans in the early 20th century when it was reported that homosexuality and even gay marriage customs were pretty common in the region. Neither the colonial superpowers nor successive Egyptian governments took a very kind view of this, and suppression efforts became more successful as the century went on. But I think it's an interesting testament to how physical distance can equate to cultural distance, even when artificial colonial border drawing means you're technically the same country. More recently, the game Assassin's Creed Origins used Siwa prominently, and with what I hope was actual historical insight rather than happy accident, chose the remote region as the homeland of the game's protagonist Bayek, a man not overly taken with the Egypt of his own lifetime, and wishing for the maintenance and restoration of Egypt's older ways. It's the story of a Siwan defying mainstream Egyptian expectations, a Siwan holding Egypt's fate in the balance. Siwa, even in Euro-American fictional imagination, is Egypt's deciding vote, its last holdout on religion, identity, maybe even sexuality. And perhaps that's why, somewhere northeast of Luxor, I personally suspect there really is an ancient Persian army beneath those unforgiving dunes. Thanks for watching, and thanks for keeping those likes and comments and subscriptions coming. If you've got a few to spare, and since you're on your way somewhere else anyway, why not take a look at Zilla's Athenium? Zilla is a friend of the Armchair and has some really fascinating stuff on her channel, so I urge you to go and take a look. I've put a link in the description. The Spartan generals bribing me in the hopes of favourable prophecies are my backers at patreon.com/armchairegypt. Thanks as ever for your support, and until next time, my fellow armchair Egyptologists, life, prosperity and health to you all. Thanks for watching. Head over to my channel for more, or click here to see what the YouTube demons think you should watch next. I hope you'll consider subscribing. If you'd like to support and collaborate on the channel with me, go to patreon.com/armchairegypt. You can also join my Discord community, there's an invite link in the description.